Yo, what's up guys? Imagine Create Destroy here. Today's build is not going to end the way some of y'all want. I started this channel with the idea to destroy my dioramas at the end, and lately it's been hard to part with my builds, but I decided it was time to fuck some shit up. So when I'm done with this build, it and I are going to get in a one-sided fist fight that it's not going to win. Alright, let's get started with the build guys. First I glued together these 4 pieces of XPS foam, then busted out one of the minis I'm going to use, just to give me an idea of how big the tunnels need to be. This doesn't need to be perfect. I want it to be a little rough around the edges, so I just freehanded it, and I'll get out my hot wire foam cutter and get to carving out the tunnels. I carved out the bulk of the tunnels, then came back and cleaned it up a bit, then just used the foam cutter to scratch at the foam to give it a more realistic rock texture. After I finished that, I used this old pancake batter box to hide the gap lines on the sides and top. It was weird because for a while I kept smelling pancakes and could not figure out what it was. 2 days later, it finally hit me. It was the cardboard I used. It kept making me really hungry. Now I got a little ahead of myself here and was about to start on the support beams for the mine shaft. I was about to glue them into place, then I realized I was an idiot and super glue melts foam.
What are you?
An idiot sandwich.
So to prevent the super glue from melting the foam, I'll use this black paint and Mod Podge to add a protective layer. Not only will it protect the foam from the super glue, but it'll also act as a good base coat for when I paint the rocks. Once that's dried, now I can add the support beams. For this, I use balsa wood strips and a lot of super glue. When you're doing this, make sure and cut the beams a bit longer than needed so the pressure holds them into place while the super glue dries. I added a top beam and moved on to the rest of the supports. Next up, I'll build the bridge to connect these 2 walkways. You might be thinking, why is there a random hole in this mine shaft? Well, I don't know, it's just there, so let's not think too far into it or it won't make much sense. Now it's time to make these rocks look a little more rocky with a good rock painting technique. I started with the suede craft paint as a base coat. I also used this paint to base coat the bridge and support beams, then made some washes with a bright red, brick red, and a golden brown. I used water to thin down the acrylic paints, then randomly applied the washes on the diorama. I was light with the red and heavier handed with the browns. I also wet blended the brown into the reds just to give the colors a better transition and more natural feel. Before we move on to the black wash, I made sure to let this fully dry so it doesn't smear when the wash goes on. Once the black wash dried, I realized I forgot to dry brush with the white to highlight the edges of the rocks, but that's okay, I'll just do that and then we'll add another layer of black wash after. I'll paint the wood with this shit brown color, then dry brush with a less shit colored brown, and do a final dry brush with the, you guessed it, off-white. You thought I was gonna say shit brown again, didn't you? Get your mind out of the gutter. Now we can work on the lighting for this build. First I'll put the lights through these holes I drilled off camera with my pin vise, then I'll carve out a hole in the bottom to hide the battery pack. And of course, it's not long enough.
My disappointment is immeasurable, and my day is ruined.
Screw it, I'm bashing this thing to pieces anyway. I'll just tape it to the back and call it good enough. I'll solder the wires together, test the lights just to make sure they work. We'll move on to painting the minis for this build. While I do that, I'll get into the backstory. These guys were on their way to a neighboring settlement to do some trading for some supplies when a huge sandstorm hit, forcing them into a nearby cave they had never seen before. Upon entering the cave, they discovered a network of tunnels from an abandoned mine shaft. So instead of sitting around, they decided to explore and forage a little bit for left behind equipment or any metal ore that could be useful. Little did they know this mine was abandoned for a reason. Well, they would soon find that reason out the hard way. Will they survive? Nah, probably not. And if they do, they definitely won't survive my fist, so it's a lose-lose no matter what. When painting the minis, I kept it really simple. I started by base coating with the green and purple, then used an off-white to lighten each color for dry brushing to help highlight the raised edges and bring out a bit of detail. Then I painted the eyes and teeth and followed with a brown wash. Same thing with this, just for some extra detail. This mini came with these little plastic caps for these weird nodule thingies on the back, but when I put them on, it looked really cheap, so I'll just leave those off, add some blood to the teeth, and call the creature done. Next, I'll paint the victims. These guys were super easy. I just base coated them all with various colors, dry brushed the donkey a bit to add a little depth, and hit everything with a layer of brown wash to give a little more detail, and to make them look a little dirty and grimy, as I imagine Wasteland Wonders probably don't shower much. This build's getting pretty close to being finished. I'll go ahead and glue these guys into place, then paint the sides with a black 4.0, which is usually the last step, but I almost forgot to glue the creature. So I'll do that real quick, and that's another diorama down. Let's get into the beauty shots, and I'll go ahead and bash this thing up.